Alright, so, hello, Internet. It's been a while. I've missed you. How are you doing? Today, we have a brawl. A random brawl that we chose last time, which is Thor versus Lights Out.
Gonna be a good discussion today, guys. Different movies. One of them kind of sucks, and the other one is really good.
The other one's...
But which one's which?
Oh no! Oh no.
For being honest, I like them both. Relatively speaking.
Go into your first impressions, if you would.
My first impressions. People give Thor a lot of crap. But that's only on the spectrum of Marvel movies. If we take it off the spectrum of Marvel movies and compare it to something that is not, like Lights Out, I think it deserves a lot more credit. That being said, Lights Out as a movie is actually really good. I actually really enjoyed it. And I've watched it a few times since, and I don't even like horror movies.
I am a sucker for a Kenneth Branagh movie. And any chance I get, I'll watch it. You know, Lights Out was alright. I'm gonna be honest, I liked The Short better, but Lights Out was fine. I'm probably gonna be voted for Thor for this one, though.
Well, someone has to.
Throw it down there.
Thor is really good, but I feel like it's only good because of its association with Marvel and the MCU. It's not even the best of the Marvel movies, as proved by our Marvel ranking.
It's actually towards the worst of the Marvel movies.
At the beginning of our channel, actually.
But it's a Marvel movie.
Lights Out is like one of, if not my favorite horror movie. I think the concept is super unique and original.
Didn't rely too much on jump scares.
No, but there were still some good scares.
It did have a few jump scares.
Right. And I think it's really an important one because it focuses on some kind of tougher subjects like mental illness and suicide and things like that, and I'll discuss more on that later. But yeah, I think I'm going to push for Lights Out.
Okay, so Lights Out is a 2016 movie that was directed by David Sandberg, and it stars Teresa Palmer and Gabriel Bateman. General overall synopsis: a creepy lady who can only be seen in the dark terrorizes a couple of children.
Yeah.
Thor is a 2011 movie directed by Kenneth Branagh, stars Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, and Sir Anthony Hopkins, and is the story of Thor, the god of thunder who is banished to Earth to prove his worth. And yes, I rhymed that on purpose.
Oh, you did.
He's a rhymer. He's a poet, and sometimes he doesn't even know he's rhyming those words.
I got you. So, it's good. I like it. It's the very first appearance of Hawkeye in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A lot of people forget that, but I want people to remember that Hawkeye was in Thor.
He was.
For like a second.
If we can go into the story right away now. See, Thor takes the classic like fish out of water kind of story. This isn't his element, this isn't his world. It's like a classic trope, but with superheroes put into it. And it's not a bad story, and I think that's kind of like the best story that Thor could have been, you know?
At least at that stage. And Kenneth Branagh, he's a very classical director. He's a classical actor. Mm-hmm. He's very Shakespearean, and a lot of people forget that the beginning stages of Marvel, every movie was totally different from the other one. There was Iron Man, and then Captain America, and Hulk, and Thor, and they were all different and unique and weird from each other, and so Thor was their Shakespearean, over-the-top, melodramatic superhero.
I feel like it was a little boring, though, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I mean, I get what they were going for, I just feel like it didn't resonate with as many people as it could have. Mm-hmm. That being said, you're right, it was unique from the rest of the Marvel movies. That might have hurt it in a way, just because, I mean, if you're comparing it to Iron Man was out of the water.
And see, that's the thing, is that they were going in a bunch of different directions, like, hey, let's try some weird stuff, and then they found what worked, and then reeled it back in. Well, what worked was action comedies, which Thor is not. It is action drama. Melodrama.
I'm glad the movie exists, but I feel like we would have had just as good of introductions to Loki and Thor just in the first Avengers movie. I mean, think about they're in that plane thing, and all of a sudden the lightning starts coming up. It's like, oh, what's that? It's like, oh, the God of Thunder, and then Cap says his line about God not dressing like that, and I think it's funny. And then it just Thor shows up, and I think that's awesome. I think that's a great introduction, and I think the beginning of Loki just being there and like, I'm gonna go to Earth now. You're like, who's this guy? And he shows up on Earth. It's like, I'm Loki. Deal with it. I think those are good introductions.
I think Thor was a necessary movie, and I really don't think it was a bad movie. I think that the story overall was at least slightly interesting. I liked it more than I liked the second Thor.
Sure.
Well, I mean...
Right. And you're right, it wasn't as funny. See, here's what I think. Thor 3, Thor Ragnarok, was really funny. It went straight to comedy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I loved it. I loved every part of it. I feel like if Thor hadn't taken itself so seriously, not to go to that level like right off, but like thrown in a few more jokes, like, you know, Thor was less of a serious character, more like, I don't know, what Robert Downey Jr. did with Iron Man, where it was serious, but there was still a lot of comedy in it.
And see, I think at first they were trying to make them more of distinct characters. Again, this is fledgling Marvel. This is before they've even really been taken over by Disney at this point. They're just trying to figure things out. And having the balls to hire a Shakespearean director to make your weird Scandinavian gods movie is interesting, and it's a good idea on paper. I will say, it is a little bit of a boring story. That being said, I think that it's better than Lights Out.
Yeah.
I know you're going to argue with me.
That's the point of the channel. So
And
be ready for that.
That is the point of the channel, but the reason why is because I feel like Lights Out neutered itself. It could have been so much more, and it wasn't.
Yeah, but I feel like it still had its own thing that sets it apart. Yeah, it's a horror movie, and it kind of has that basic horror movie setup, but I think the story in Lights Out is no more original or creative than in the origin story of the ghost. This is, I'm going to spoiler warning if that isn't clear already. This ghost is a manifestation of the mom's depression, based on this friend she had in a mental asylum that was allergic to the sun. And every time she has kind of a depressive episode, this ghost appears. The first most notable one was when the main character was a kid, and she ran amok, but then the mom got on new meds, she met a new guy, and everything was fine, but now that guy is gone. And now this mom's having a hard time, and so the girl has to kind of go back to her own childhood trauma, I guess, to save her younger brother. I don't know, I just think that ghost is so unique. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's going to play into characters later, but I do like the uniqueness of the story. I like that they took a horror movie, which I don't generally like, and made it entertaining for me.
I think that's kind of my biggest problem with Lights Out, is that to defeat the monster that's a manifestation of her depression, the mom kills herself. And that's an awful message to send.
I don't think it was specifically saying, hey kids, suicide will fix all your problems. I think that was the point, is the mom decided that was her only way out, and it's to the point that suicide and depression is serious, and it should be taken seriously. And
yeah,
I guess it worked for that family, but like, how much did they actually win after
right.
that?
The director has stated that if he gets a chance to make a sequel, that he would want to show that the mom's suicide actually made everything worse, and that their lives have gotten worse because of it, and things like that. And that's great. that still doesn't fix the inherent problem that I see with the movie.
You know, something I've noticed recently in our videos that we've done? Anytime a movie mentions any kind of, kind of serious bad thing, like when we were ranking Harry Potter's, you specifically had a problem with Fantastic Beasts because of the child abuse and the witch protests and everything, which obviously that stuff is terrible, but I think in order to have a good story, you're going to have some darker themes, but I think it's important not to portray that this will fix everything, this is okay. It's important to still say these are dark themes. It's dark, it's bad.
Oh, for sure. And it definitely comes down to context and how the subject matter is handled. I absolutely think that the ending could have been handled better for Lights Out.
Well,
But-
I mean, getting into this discussion, I really want to start talking about the characters.
Yeah, we can talk more about specifically.
Yeah, let's vote on this, because I feel like we've all said what we want to say.
On the story.
On the story.
So who's voting for Thor?
Lights Out.
I'm voting for Lights Out.
Yeah. So getting into the characters, specifically with the mom in Lights Out, I think at the very least the manifestation was giving us a view into her own psyche, or the psyche of a depressed person, where at the end she basically decides, like, the only way to save my kids, the only way to make their lives better is to kill myself. You got to realize that, I mean, people with depression really think that.
They do.
I know. To anyone that might be suffering from depression, whether you're watching this or not, it's worth it to live. And you can stick around. And we'll be here to love you.
And, I mean, depression is also a serious medical condition. You should get help. Go
Absolutely.
see doctors, therapists, get on medication if you need to.
There are plenty of places to get help, to just talk. There are plenty of people willing to listen. That's the biggest thing. Well, that got a lot more real.
But I think that's an
It needs to
important
be said.
thing to the characters, that they represented that really, really well. I mean, I feel like we've all dealt with people who have had depression. My dad has depression. Your dad has depression. Do you know depression?
My dad has a mustache.
Cool.
But the point is, it
Causes everyone else depression.
I mean, there was realism to it, and I think that they portrayed the characters really well in a way that it had such a dark ending.
Sorry, you finish.
I was just going to say that the characters, you couldn't have cared about that dark ending unless they actually made you care about these characters.
I will say, I will give this to the movie. Having the douchebag boyfriend actually turn out to be a good guy that made some smart decisions was awesome.
Right.
And that, I did love that about the movie. That at first you're like, he's just a
just gonna
dirtbag, but he ended up being a good guy that I felt at least genuinely cared about.
Yeah.
The girl and her
I thought
family.
that was cool.
Now, with that being said, I think the characters, I would honestly probably vote for Thor because of that movie, what has persisted? It's the characters. Thor and Loki themselves have probably grown to be some of the best characters in the MCU so far.
People love Loki. Like, ridiculously love Loki. Because he was the only one that knew what kind of movie he was in the first movie.
So I think the characters, that's the only thing that's persisted because of this first Thor movie is the characters. And as much as I like Lights Out, I think Thor needs this category.
I think you're right. I think Thor did a really good job. There was some serious character growth. And they just made a lot of likable characters that, they continue to grow over time. I feel like a lot of that likability is due to other movies, which I think might hurt here. But in a way, you are right. Like, they set up a lot of really great characters, and Loki is loved, and so is Thor, honestly.
Yeah. I'm going to vote for Thor on characters.
I'm voting for Thor.
I'm also voting for Thor, not that it mattered.
Cool.
Rewatchability, that's a tough one, because watching Thor, I'm always thinking to myself, I could be watching any other Marvel movie.
Marvel as a whole, the MCU as a whole, is generally a lot more rewatchable.
Right.
But it's not necessarily because of this one. Again, I think they had better introductions in the Avengers movie. And that's one I'd much rather watch.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean, you're just comparing it to these other Marvel movies, and it can be kind of meh. But at the same time, I don't want to like base it off of that. I want to base it off of it as a movie by itself.
Sure.
Marvel movies are incredibly rewatchable. This is an origin
for sure.
story. You don't need to watch anything before to really get into it.
And it's like genetically engineered from the ground up to make you addicted to these kind of movies.
Right.
Because Marvel.
And it worked.
But that being said, Thor is by far the least that I've watched, and I think I've watched Lights Out probably as much as I've watched Thor.
About the same amount of times.
And if we're going into a horror movie and category and I had to pick one to watch, I would pick Cabin in the Woods or Lights Out.
Yeah.
I'm still going to vote for Thor for this one just because I love horror movies. Of horror movies, Lights Out just doesn't do it for me.
I don't really love horror movies. But of the horror movies I've seen, Lights Out is great.
I hate horror movies.
I'll vote for Lights Out.
Yeah, I feel like Lights Out was just a little more fun. Just a little bit.
It's as fun as a scary ghost depression movie can be.
So, merits and genre.
Again, like, I feel like Thor just kind of... What it has is because of its association with Marvel.
But Thor was one of those movies that created that association.
Yeah,
They're trying these weird, offbeat superheroes. Marvel movies, their superheroes were owned by Sony and Fox, and so they're making their own movies. They were taking B and C and Q list superheroes and made them interesting and fun, and things like Thor, who is actually also a DC superhero, no relation.
You're trying to forget about that one.
I think that Daniel has some points. I think that Thor did probably some of the least to popularize Marvel, but at the same time it is part of just such a big, notable franchise, and to say that it didn't do anything for it, or to say that it's not a part of it really, would be ridiculous. Could you imagine Avengers without Thor?
No.
Could you imagine, any Loki wouldn't be there. Thor gave us Loki. Thor gave us Thor.
If for no other reason, and just imagine this, Marvel has no problems recasting and changing things that don't work. That's why we got the Muffalo in Avengers and not Edward Norton.
That's the problem with horror movies, specifically when we talk about this channel. And this goes the same with like romantic comedies. It's an all ever-changing, lukewarm category. Horror and romantic comedies specifically are popular or known for the crappy, cheap, easy-to-make movies.
And see, I hate that about horror movies.
I do too, and I wish that Lights Out wasn't labeled because of that, because I really like it.
Yeah.
I think it had a unique concept and changed
what
what horror movies should be.
Yeah, I don't think that Lights Out was a cheap, crappy horror movie. I think it was really good, and I think it fit really well into its genre. But at the same time, I don't feel like it did anything for
Didn't
the
really
genre.
impact it.
No.
But that's because of the stigma around the category as a whole, or around the genre as a whole.
But as a whole, it should be able to affect itself within itself. Think of horror movies that have affected the genre, like Insidious, or Conjuring, or Annabelle. Well, I guess those are part of the same.
All of those are
Cabin in the Woods definitely got some notoriety in it.
Evil Dead, Don't Breathe.
Yeah.
I still
Don't
think that
Breathe.
Don't Breathe is in the same category.
Get
as Lights
Out.
Get Out really did change.
There are
Place.
movies that can impact its own genre, and that's kind of what we're looking for. But the point is, it has the ability to affect its own domain, and I just feel like it didn't enough to beat out Thor.
It's too bad.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna vote for Thor for merits and genre.
Yeah, so.
I guess.
Oh, it's 2-2. That leaves emotional impact. No. You see, the emotion I created there is called confusion.
You're right.
He's very strong.
He's a genius. Okay. We already went kind of dark and kind of deep with Lights Out. I don't really feel like we should mention that again, except for the fact that it has that. Thor is fun, and it's actiony, it's a Marvel movie, and we get it.
Definitely have that Renaissance vibe.
But Lights Out just...
But is Renaissance an emotion?
No. It's a theme. Lights Out...
I feel Renaissance.
Lights
You
Out
are a
tackles
Renaissance man.
some serious topics that honestly affect me personally. Like we said, my dad has depression. I know what it's like to have my family member consider suicide, and it's scary and sad, and I guess that's why I think Lights Out has the better emotion, but if for no other reason than because I find it personally emotionally impacting.
It tackles stronger subjects.
Stronger subjects, and maybe they didn't handle it as well as they could, but
But at least they tried.
at least they brought up the conversation.
Yeah, and I feel like they kept a tone pretty decently throughout. It wasn't the scariest horror movie ever. I don't think it was really trying to be, but it did create feelings that made me think, oh, okay. Like, this is kind of creepy, this is... And, you know, those other sad, depressing things that it was kind of going for.
I just think that Lights Out tried to go for more. Whether it hit that bar or not, I feel like it was trying to make a statement. It was trying to say more than just, ooh, it's scary, while still being kind of scary.
Yeah.
Thor was fun, but I don't know.
I mean, for an action movie, it didn't have a whole ton of action. It had some.
There are more movies in that genre I'd rather watch for that emotion.
No real thoughts on this one, Daniel?
You know, honestly, even though it didn't jive with me, I understand where Lights Out's coming from, and so I'm probably going to vote for Lights Out.
Same. Well, that's our winner. Lights Out. 3 out of 5 categories. It was a close one.
Was close, and that's why we started having a tiebreaker. Just over a year ago now, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like all of our brawls have been coming down to that. It's
Yeah.
been 2-2 until the last category.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them, but emotional impact, I feel like, is a really important one to consider.
Probably a good thing we keep it last.
Yeah. So let us know what you guys think. I mean, we're not judge, jury, and executioner here, but we do have our opinions.
Individually, we're as a team, we are judge, jury, executioner.
Yes.
Got the one I wanted.
Cool.
Well, be sure to catch us next time when we compare
Mary Poppins.
Kangaroo Jack.
Oh my gosh. That's gonna be fun.
Why was that in the bowl?
I put it there. Love that movie.
Oh, heck.
Oh man.
Okay. Just next time we talk about Mary Poppins and Kangaroo Jack.
Better much.
Yeah.